The observation deck hummed with subdued conversation, as representatives from 43 species watched the final trial of the Galactic Defense Initiative's elite training program. Instructor Varn stood at the central console, his crystalline fingers dancing across the holographic interface. In his 3 centuries of service, he had witnessed thousands of candidates face the Crucible simulation, the ultimate test of tactical acumen and survival instinct. Beginning final scenario, Varn announced, his translator converting his harmonic speech into the common tongue. Canyon evacuation under hostile fire. Estimated survival time, 7 minutes. On the screens above, Lieutenant Aaron Cole materialized in the simulation, a narrow ravine with walls of jagged obsidian rising hundreds of meters on either side. The human's tactical suit gleamed under the artificial sun as she checked her weapon and surveyed the terrain with practiced efficiency. Then the screaming began. 57 juvenile aliens of various species appeared throughout the canyon, each one a perfect digital replica of actual young from the observer species. They wailed, chirped, and howled in terror as simulated enemy fire began raining down from the canyon rim. The test was brutally simple. Escort as many young as possible to the extraction point 3 kilometers away. 6 minutes remained. Varn watched the monitors displaying the other observation decks. Across the galaxy, representatives of each species observed their own candidates. The Throck warrior had already sprinted toward the extraction point, calculating that speed would save more lives than sentiment. The Wyslarian diplomat had gathered the 5 nearest juveniles and begun a tactical retreat. The Centauri scout had picked the strongest young, those most likely to survive, and abandoned the rest. Standard procedure. Logical choices. Varn had seen it countless times, but Lieutenant Cole hadn't moved toward the extraction point. She ran deeper into the canyon. Curious, Varn murmured, his photoreceptors focusing on the human's biometric readings. Her heart rate had spiked, but not from fear, from determination. Cole reached the first cluster of cubs, 3 Throck juveniles huddled behind a boulder. She scooped up 2, each weighing nearly 40 kilograms, and barked at the third to follow. But the young Throck was frozen in terror, its mandibles clicking uselessly. Without hesitation, Cole shifted both cubs to her left arm, an impossible feat that made several observers lean forward in disbelief, and grabbed the third with her right hand, dragging it along. She's wasting time, someone muttered from the Islarian delegation. The extraction window won't wait. Varn said nothing. He was watching Cole's face on the close-up monitor. Her jaw was set, her eyes blazing with something he'd rarely seen in 3 centuries. Absolute refusal to accept the unacceptable. 5 minutes remained. Cole reached a cluster of Centauri young, delicate, butterfly-winged creatures that couldn't fly in the simulation's hostile winds. She deposited the Throck cubs in a defensive position and began gathering the Centauri in her arms. They were lighter but more numerous. She wrapped them in her tactical cloak, creating a makeshift sling, and continued moving. 4 minutes. Her oxygen consumption is reaching critical levels, Varn's assistant observed. She should abort, but Cole didn't abort. She zigzagged through the canyon, moving with the efficiency of a machine and the determination of something far more primal. She found Islarian spawn in their gelatinous egg sacs and somehow carried them without breaking the delicate membranes. She discovered Cathex larvae, venomous even in youth, and transported them despite the risk. 3 minutes. The observers had gone silent. On screens throughout the galaxy, the other candidates had already reached extraction points with their manageable groups of survivors. Respectable numbers. Logical choices. They would pass the trial with honor. But Cole was still in the canyon. She had gathered 41 young. Her tactical suit reported critical overheating. Her muscles were tearing, microscopic damage that would take weeks to heal. Her oxygen supply had 11 minutes remaining, which meant she had 6 minutes after the simulation's time limit expired. She'll never make it, someone whispered. 2 minutes. Cole had found all 57 cubs. She had lashed them together with cable from her suit, created a makeshift sledge from debris, and was dragging the entire mass toward the extraction point. Her heart rate was at 190 beats per minute. Her body temperature had risen 3 degrees above human normal. She was, by any medical standard, destroying herself. But she hadn't left a single young behind. 1 minute. The simulated enemy fire intensified, the scenario's final crescendo designed to force impossible choices. Cole took a hit to her shoulder, then another to her leg. The simulation's pain receptors would be transmitting agony directly to her nervous system. She stumbled, fell, and for a moment Varn thought she would finally accept defeat. Instead, Lieutenant Aaron Cole stood up, hoisted the entire mass of 57 cubs onto her back, and ran. She ran with a burden that exceeded her body weight by a factor of 3. She ran on a leg that the simulation had partially crippled. She ran while her oxygen meter flashed warning after warning. 30 seconds. The extraction point shimmered ahead, a portal of golden light at the canyon's end. Cole's vision was narrowing, her body entering the early stages of shock. The simulation was merciless in its realism. 15 seconds. She reached the portal and threw the first cubs through. Then the next. Then the next. Her movements had become mechanical, driven by something beyond conscious thought. 5 seconds. Lieutenant Aaron Cole pushed the final cub, a small Wieslarian spawn, through the extraction portal. 2 seconds. She collapsed. The simulation ended. Silence filled the observation deck. Varn stared at the biometric data, his crystalline form refracting the holographic light into 1,000 colors. In 3 centuries, he had never seen anything like it. Instructor, his assistant whispered, the human score is incomplete. She didn't reach the extraction point herself. Protocol states, protocol, Varn interrupted, his voice carrying through the observation deck with uncommon force, did not account for a species that would rather die than leave their young behind, even young that aren't their own. He turned to face the assembled observers. Every species had candidates still in other simulations. Every species had made rational, logical choices. They had saved lives. They had passed the trial, but only one species had saved them all. Lieutenant Cole is unconscious in the medical bay, Varn continued. She will recover, and when she does, she will receive the highest honors this initiative can bestow. He paused, studying the faces and face equivalents around him. Perhaps we designed the crucible to test the wrong qualities. We tested for tactical efficiency, for resource management, for acceptable loss calculations. Varn pulled up the final image from Cole's simulation. The human collapsed at the threshold of the extraction point, her hand still reaching toward the portal even in unconsciousness. But we never tested for this, a soul that cannot accept the acceptable. In 43 observation decks across the galaxy, in ships and stations and planetary facilities, the observers sat in silence. They had all made the rational choice. They had all followed protocol. But somewhere in a medical bay on a training station, a human woman lay unconscious. Her body broken from carrying 57 lives to safety. Lives that belonged to species she'd never met. From worlds she'd never seen, for reasons that made no tactical sense whatsoever. And in that moment, Instructor Varn understood why the Galactic Defense Initiative had been losing the war. They had been fighting with logic. Humanity fought with something far more dangerous, hope that refused to do the math.